It wasn't supposed to be the kind of night anyone would remember. A Wednesday taping of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, studio pack, cue cards prep, and the energy, like, cheeky standard. Meghan Markle had been booked months ago, not for controversy, but for promotion. A new docuseries, a book in the works. What better stage to soften public edges than Colbert's velvet-covered sarcasm? But what unfolded under the studio lights wasn't a publicity tour. It was a rupture. It began, oddly enough, with laughter. Colbert, in his usual tone, quipped, "So, Meghan, when the British press isn't chasing you around, do you ever miss silence?" The audience chuckled. Meghan did too at first. Then she tilted her head slightly, as if something shifted internally. "I think," she replied calmly, "that silence is only golden when people aren't trying to stuff it down your throat." The crowd's laughter halted. A few oohs escaped, unsure whether to laugh or applaud. Colbert leaned back, raising his eyebrows, not provoked, but intrigued. He asked, "Are we talking about the palace? Or the press?" Meghan smiled. Not the practiced Duchess smile, but something quieter. "There's really not much difference when both feel entitled to your silence." The real difference? One crowns you, the other crucifies you. Colbert tried to pivot. "But surely your exit from royal life, wasn't that freedom?" Meghan's expression cooled. "Freedom is not walking away from a title. Freedom is realizing that people never wanted to see you wear it in the first place." The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. The producers behind the curtain exchanged glances. This wasn't rehearsed. This wasn't soft PR. Meghan wasn't on the stage to correct the narrative. She was unraveling it. Colbert, ever the wordsmith, raised a defense. "But some people would say, with all due respect, that you've had your chance to speak. Oprah, Netflix, even The Cut. At what point does speaking become blaming?" And that was it. Meghan's poise didn't falter, but her tone sharpened. "That question," she said, "is exactly the problem. Women don't get to express pain without being accused of wielding it like a weapon. You didn't ask Harry why he spoke. You didn't ask King Charles why he denied emotion until it suited the crown. But you ask me because I'm the woman who didn't know her place." Silence. Even the applause sign remained dim. The studio lights, too warm now, caught beads of tension on Colbert's forehead. He smiled nervously. "Okay," he chuckled. "So, how do you really feel?" "I feel," Meghan said, "like America gave me a second chance to be heard. And I'm not going to apologize for using it." The audience now applauded, but cautiously. The energy had shifted. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was testimony. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Colbert reached for a card, likely the next question, maybe about her podcast, but Meghan cut in. "You know," she said slowly, "this show is one of the only places where guests think they're safe. But it's also one of the only places where jokes become judgment." Colbert stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she replied, "you invited me here for a conversation, not a courtroom. But if you want answers, ask the real questions." A low murmur from the crowd. Some heads turned. A stage assistant near camera 3 whispered into their headset. Colbert, visibly unsettled, tried to regain footing. "Look, Meghan, I admire your voice, I do. But let's not turn this into—" She leaned forward. "Into what?" "Into a moment where a woman finally doesn't play polite? Into a moment where I don't deflect or perform?" "No," Colbert replied. "Into a lecture." The audience gasped. Meghan sat back, eyes unwavering. "Then maybe you should stop inviting people who live the news just to make headlines from them." The control room went quiet. Inside the booth, executive producer Tom Purcell looked at the teleprompter, then at the countdown clock. 7 minutes until commercial break. Except this wasn't going to last that long. Meghan stood. "I came here out of respect," she said, "but I won't stay where respect isn't mutual." Colbert stood too, instinctively, almost apologetically. "Meghan, wait." That's not. But she was already off stage. The audience, confused and electrified, looked around for direction. Was this scripted? Was this real? It was real. Security did not intervene. Producers didn't signal a cut. The broadcast delay couldn't edit what had just happened. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, had walked off the Late Show. Not stormed, not screamed, simply exited on her terms. Social media exploded within the hour. A backstage intern leaked the raw feed. The clip of Meghan saying, "You didn't ask Harry why he spoke," reached over 12 million views in under 6 hours. Fox News ran the story with the headline, "Meghan storms out of interview. Can't handle tough questions?" MSNBC aired it with a different tone. Colbert under fire after tense exchange with Meghan Markle. But the most shared post came from a young black journalist who tweeted, "She didn't walk off because she was angry. She walked off because dignity doesn't beg to be understood." Back at the studio, Colbert sat back in his chair. The audience was still clapping, not because they were told to, but because they didn't know what else to do. The camera slowly panned out. No jokes, no outro music, just a silent host and an empty chair. The fallout was immediate and unrelenting. Less than 12 hours after Meghan Markle's dramatic exit from The Late Show, the entertainment industry, political commentators, and even British tabloids were treating the incident like a constitutional crisis. Twitter, now branded simply as X, was ablaze with hashtags, #MeghanWalks, #ColbertConfrontation, and the especially viral #ShesetaTrite. The moment had ceased being a single television segment. It had become a line in the cultural sand. Inside CBS headquarters, emergency meetings were already underway. Producers scrambled to contain the growing narrative, weighing whether to issue a statement or let the story die down. But it wasn't going to die down. Not when every angle of Meghan's walk-off was dissected by talking heads across the political spectrum. Somewhere between the noise, Stephen Colbert himself was reeling. He sat in his Manhattan apartment the next morning, coffee growing cold on the table, eyes fixed on the screen. Every news network played the same clip over and over again. Meghan saying, "You didn't ask Harry why he spoke." It was hauntingly perfect television, an unfiltered moment, completely unscripted, and therefore unforgettable. His team had offered to release an official apology. He declined, for now. He knew better than to pour water on a grease fire. But deep down, he also knew something else. He had underestimated her. By midday, Meghan's team released a brief, pointed statement. The Duchess of Sussex appeared on The Late Show to engage in meaningful dialogue about the intersection of media, identity, and public narratives. She stood by her words. She always will. That was it. No press conference. No publicist on cable news. Just one line of clarity. The silence after the statement did more than any tweet could. Meanwhile, the British press had a field day. The Daily Mail ran a predictably brutal headline. Meghan's meltdown. Duchess walks out when faced with real questions. But even among the usual royal watchers, there was a split forming. A growing number of columnists began questioning whether the palace had, all along, underestimated what America might do with a woman it refused to accept. In Los Angeles, Oprah Winfrey reportedly called Meghan that afternoon. The two had remained close after their bombshell interview in 2021. According to sources, Oprah simply told her, "You were right to walk." They asked for honesty. They weren't ready for truth. Back on social media, the clip of Meghan calling out Colbert's framing hit 30 million views within 24 hours. A prominent black feminist scholar tweeted, "This is what happens when black women tell the truth in spaces built to dilute it." Meghan didn't storm out. She chose sovereignty. The word sovereignty caught fire. Merchandise sites began printing t-shirts overnight. "Sovereignty looks like this," with an outline of Meghan walking off the set. Memes exploded. One had Colbert's face frozen mid-reaction, captioned, "When the Duchess brings a revolution to your monologue." Another had Meghan in black and white, walking away like a hero in a film noir tagged with exit, stage dignity. But the impact went beyond entertainment. Women's rights organizations, particularly those focused on women of color, issued statements praising Meghan's composure and clarity. Panels were hastily organized. Podcasts recorded late-night specials. TikTok creators, some political, some comedic, reenacted the moment in split-screen style, drawing attention to what they called the invisible rules of media civility. Within 2 days, The View devoted an entire episode to the segment. Whoopi Goldberg was blunt. "I've sat in that chair. I've watched the tone shift when a woman, especially a black woman, decides not to give the cute soundbite." Meghan didn't flinch. That matters. Joy Behar, more skeptical, argued, but she was there to promote a series. What did she expect? Colbert's job is to challenge. It's his show. To which Sunny Hostin responded, "Challenge is fine, but belittling disguised as banter is just emotional cornering." The tension wasn't just on screen. It seeped into the broader cultural divide between people who thought Meghan had overreacted and those who believed she had simply drawn a line in the sand. That line, once invisible, now gleamed under the spotlight. And then, just when it felt like the story had hit its peak, something unexpected happened. A leaked internal email from CBS surfaced. It was from a producer on The Late Show, written just minutes after Meghan's exit. The subject line, "We lost control." The body of the email was brief. She called him out. "We had nothing scripted for this. Tell legal we need to prep a response." The leak went viral instantly, not because it said anything scandalous, but because it confirmed what many had already suspected. Meghan's appearance had cracked the illusion of control that most late-night shows cling to. By day 3, Colbert released a short video message, not an apology, but an acknowledgement. This show has always welcomed tough conversations. Last night, we had one. Meghan Markle brought the full weight of her experience and perspective. We didn't plan for it, but maybe we should have. It wasn't enough for some. But for others, it was the closest mainstream acknowledgement that Meghan had not, in fact, melted down, but disrupted a long-standing tradition of media compliance. And while Colbert may have moved on to the next episode, Meghan's walk-off had already cemented itself into a different kind of legacy. Not a career-ending outburst, but a recalibration of how public women, especially those of color, are allowed to speak, stand, and exit. While much of the public furor focused on Meghan's abrupt departure from The Late Show, a quieter but just as powerful narrative was beginning to take shape behind the scenes. This wasn't just about a television appearance gone off script. It had become a referendum on how media treats women, especially women who don't bend to the expected script. For Meghan, it was a turning point, and in some ways, she had been preparing for it her whole life. Those who had followed her rise from actress to duchess to public advocate knew that this wasn't an isolated moment. Rather, it was the latest chapter in a long, often grueling battle between how she saw herself and how institutions tried to define her. For years, British media had painted her as difficult, entitled, manipulative. The American press initially embraced her, but even that warmth had started to cool once she began to use her platform more forcefully, especially when she started naming the systems that had tried to silence her. The Colbert interview marked the collision of those two narratives. Inside the entertainment industry, conversations were shifting. Several late-night writers, speaking anonymously, said that Meghan's moment had sparked internal reviews of guest prep protocols. "We're all watching that clip on loop," one writer admitted, "not just because of what she said, but because we all realized we've cornered guests like that before. We just never expected them to walk." Other celebrities quietly reached out. According to insider reports, actress Viola Davis sent Meghan a message of support, praising her unshakable sense of dignity. Even figures who had once kept their distance began speaking out. Ava DuVernay tweeted, "That walk-off wasn't drama, it was declaration." Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert's own reputation entered a complex phase. Known for years as the smartest man in the room, The former Daily Show alum had built his career on wit, intellect, and the ability to balance irreverence with moral gravity. But the Meghan moment exposed a blind spot, his tendency, like many in his position, to assume control over the narrative. Privately, Colbert began asking questions of himself, his team, and the system that shaped his show. He didn't expect pushback, one longtime producer confided. He thought he was engaging in clever banter. But Meghan wasn't there to play clever. She was there to speak. And she didn't need his permission. The networks noticed. For the first time in years, CBS held internal meetings focused not just on ratings, but on guest treatment, optics, and race. Executives were nervous. Meghan's exit had stirred more than controversy. It had stirred accountability. In the broader culture, a new discourse began taking shape, especially among women of color in journalism and television. One viral column in The Atlantic read, "The cameras caught a rare thing, a powerful woman refusing to smile through condescension. And instead of unraveling, she walked head high, voice steady. That's not weakness. That's power." By day 5, clips from the episode had amassed over 100 million combined views across platforms. TikTok creators stitched together reenactments. Podcasts ran multi-part breakdowns. Universities began incorporating the exchange into communications and media studies lectures. But it wasn't just academic. It was deeply personal for many. Emails poured into CBS. Letters addressed to Meghan, thousands of them, arrived at her foundation's office. Stories from women who had left jobs, toxic relationships, or family conflicts with similar grace and resolve. One letter read, "You didn't storm out. You stood up for all of us who were told to shrink ourselves to fit into the room." And still, Meghan remained largely silent. No interviews. No reactive social media posts. Just presence. That silence made headlines too. "Why isn't Meghan speaking?" asked one op-ed. But in truth, she didn't need to. The moment had spoken loud enough. Then, a turning point. A clip surfaced online from a backstage mic, left on inadvertently during the commercial break before Meghan walked off. In it, you can hear Colbert conferring with a producer, clearly agitated. The audio is faint, but one line is unmistakable. "She's not giving me what I need." The reaction was instant. That one sentence changed the framing. No longer was the walk-off simply dramatic. It was strategic. It became clear that Meghan had realized she wasn't being listened to, only managed, maneuvered. "She's not giving me what I need" became a rallying cry. Printed on hoodies, etched into art, turned into protest signs. It spoke to something broader, how systems extract from women stories, emotions, vulnerabilities, without offering real safety or respect in return. Overnight, Meghan's walk-off was elevated from controversy to cultural resistance. Brands began reaching out. One high-end fashion line offered her a collaboration focused on media armor, the idea of fashion as a shield. A tech firm proposed building a platform where public figures could share unedited interviews on their own terms. An academic conference invited her to keynote a panel titled "Narrative Ownership in the Age of Virality." And still, she said little. But then came the podcast. Titled Unwritten, the first episode dropped without warning. No press release. No teaser. Just a single Instagram post, "You know my name." But not the whole story. In the debut episode, Meghan spoke, calmly, reflectively, about the night of the Colbert interview. She didn't trash him. She didn't gloat. She didn't even name him directly. Sometimes people ask questions not to hear you, but to perform listening. You can feel when that happens. And in that moment, I chose myself. The episode went viral in minutes. Listeners called it one of the most honest monologues ever released by a public figure. Critics were stunned by the clarity, the precision. No theatrics, no revenge. Just a woman reclaiming her voice on her terms. Colbert was asked about it the next night. He handled it with unexpected humility. "She said what needed to be said. I respect her choice." and I hope we all learned something from it. It was brief, but it was enough. In the days that followed, Meghan's podcast climbed to the top of every chart. Invitations rolled in from Time, from Harvard, from TED. But what mattered most was that she had done it her way. No handlers, no middlemen, no media machine spinning the narrative. Just her voice, her truth, her sovereignty. And for the millions watching, it wasn't just a comeback. It was a revolution in how women are allowed to end a conversation and begin a new one. When the second episode of Unwritten dropped, the world had already begun recalibrating its perception of Meghan Markle. No longer just a controversial figure or a media lightning rod, she had become a symbol of self-ownership, of narrative reclamation, and of the refusal to be boxed into expectations. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and unwavering. And in this new episode, she went deeper, not just recounting the Colbert fallout, but dismantling the larger structure that allowed moments like it to happen in the first place. It was never about one man, one show, or even one comment, she said. It's about a system that thrives when women don't. That line reverberated across media platforms, academic spaces, and living rooms alike. It was quoted in the New York Times, projected on walls at feminist rallies, and even became a discussion point on other late-night shows. Trevor Noah, guest hosting The Daily Show, opened with, "You know, sometimes it takes someone walking out of the room to remind everyone what should never have been allowed in that room in the first place." While Colbert remained largely silent following his short acknowledgement, his show began to change. His team added more women of color in senior editorial roles. A segment titled Reframe was introduced, where female experts were brought on to discuss how media, politics, and pop culture shape narratives, often unfairly. It was a subtle pivot, but one that didn't go unnoticed. CBS insiders revealed that the network had initiated internal audits about guest treatment, especially around women and people of color. A leaked memo included this quote from an executive: "What happened with Meghan wasn't a firestorm. It was a mirror. We're deciding whether to look into it or look away." In response to Unwritten, celebrities began sharing their own walk-off stories. Kerry Washington tweeted, "Been there. Didn't get caught on camera, but I felt every second of hers." Mindy Kaling shared a podcast episode reflecting on moments where she felt silence during interviews, panels, even studio meetings. But what struck a deeper chord was how ordinary people began stepping into the conversation. A viral hashtag, #WhennyWalk, emerged. Women from all walks of life began recounting the moment they chose themselves, quitting toxic jobs, ending manipulative friendships, standing up in classrooms or boardrooms. These weren't stories of scandal, they were stories of power rediscovered. And at the center of it all, Meghan remained steady. Her team confirmed that she was working on a forthcoming book, not a memoir, but an exploration of modern womanhood in media. Early drafts reportedly bore the working title, Exit Wounds: How Walking Away Can Be a Radical Act. Back in Hollywood, offers began to pile up. Streaming giants wanted to adapt Unwritten into a docuseries. One major studio proposed a feature film, but Meghan refused to rush. "I've had my story told for me long enough," she said in a podcast Q&A. "Now I get to choose the pace." The cultural shift sparked by the Colbert incident wasn't just symbolic, it had measurable effects. A major talent agency released a report showing a 40% increase in women of color turning down press appearances due to control over final edits. Training programs for interviewers now included modules on racial dynamics and ethical framing. Some newsrooms adopted what was called the Meghan Clause, giving guests access to pre-interview notes and final say over misrepresented quotes. But not everyone embraced the shift. Predictably, certain corners of the media, especially conservative talk shows, began spinning narratives of their own. "The princess who cried wolf," screamed one headline. "Meghan's weaponized victimhood," another opined. Meghan never addressed them directly. Instead, she kept building. By spring, Unwritten had reached over 300 million downloads. It had been translated into 5 languages. Universities like Stanford and Howard created discussion guides for classroom use. And Meghan was invited to deliver the closing keynote at the United Nations Global Women's Forum. Her speech was not dramatic. It wasn't fiery. It was controlled, precise, and unflinching. Every woman will be told she's too loud, too difficult, too fragile, too cold, too ambitious, too emotional. But rarely is she told she is enough. My message is simple. You are. And you never have to stay in a room where your dignity isn't welcome. The standing ovation lasted almost 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Colbert himself began to open up, gradually, cautiously. In a New Yorker profile, he admitted, "I misunderstood her silence as complicity. I was wrong." He later invited media ethics experts onto his show to unpack the conversation, not to absolve himself, but to start learning. One of those experts, Dr. Eliza Dumas, summed it up best. Stephen didn't just lose control of the interview. He lost control of the illusion that charm protects you from critique. And while Meghan was often framed as the woman who walked away, the truth was more powerful. She didn't walk away, she walked toward herself. Then, something unexpected happened. Months after the incident, Colbert's team quietly reached out to Meghan with an offer, not to return to the show, but to collaborate on a special segment highlighting women changing media norms around the world. To the surprise of many, Meghan agreed. The special, titled Shift, aired during prime time. It featured women journalists from Nigeria to Norway, artists from Brazil to Bangladesh, all speaking about how they fought to tell their own stories. Meghan appeared briefly at the end, not as a celebrity, but as a moderator. Calm, clear, and composed. Colbert didn't say much on air. But after the credits rolled, there was a moment caught off camera, leaked by a crew member, that captured it all. Meghan stood from her chair, walked over to Colbert, and simply said, "I'm glad we're writing a better ending." He nodded. Sometimes the most powerful act isn't the walk-off. It's the return on your own terms. And that's exactly what Meghan Markle had done.